Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. We are going to be talking about Ivan Toney being the perfect fit for Arsenal. So I know you guys want to talk about this because the striker situation or the striker conversation is always ever going at our amongst fans because some people for like 2 seasons or so have been like dying for like a number 9. So I know this is something that you guys want to talk about, and there has been some reports on it, so I want to make sure that we go through it. Um I wanted to tell you guys, one, you guys are the best, and two, um that the show that I did with Femi, the post-match show for Manchester City, is up, and so you guys can watch that, listen to that on all platforms. And usually those shows are just available for Patreon, but I made it available to everybody because it was such a big win and I didn't want anybody to miss out on the conversation. We touched on everything from the lineup, how we felt about the lineup, to what Havertz's best position is, to the Raya versus Ramsdale situation, Martinelli and how integral he is to the team, and what those 3 points mean from a personal standpoint and a progression standpoint for the club, and what it means in the greater context of the season and a potential title challenge. So we talked about all those things in a very long pod. So if you guys have a drive or you guys are working out or you're just chilling, I think it's a really good listen. And I would like for you guys to go watch it because I put a lot of edits in it, which made it take longer to come out. So make sure you guys tune into that because a lot of work went into that podcast, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. We just got done recording the second half rewatch, and that will be available to patrons after I get done with this show. I'll be able to upload it onto Patreon for you guys, so you guys can rewatch it with me and Femi. And in terms of some housekeeping, you guys can see it rolling on the bottom here that I promised you guys that I would get guests for international breaks so we can make sure that we have so I guess it's easier to talk about things when there's somebody else to talk to, especially because there's not much ever going on during international break. But I did get some guests. So Colleen will be on the show tomorrow. Lee Judges will be on the show on Thursday. And then for the Patreon pod, um, for on Monday, Dan Potts is going to be on the show. So plenty of content coming your way, whether you're a member of the YouTube channel or you're just a subscriber or you're a patron. There's going to be plenty of content for you guys. And I hope you guys enjoy that. Are you guys still happy and excited about the win? Because I literally cannot think about anything else. Like, I rewatched the game last night. I just got done doing the rewatch with Femi a couple of minutes ago. And every time I watch a little bit more of the game, that second half from Arsenal was outstanding. And I think people are taking for granted the fact that this is still Manchester City. I know that they were missing Rodri, but we were also missing a key player. And my goodness, were we so good in that second half. We were good in the first half, but we just kicked it into another gear in that second half. And I don't think anybody has really done Manchester City the way that we did them. I mean, we were physical, we were knocking them around, we were keeping possession, we were popping it around them, and everybody looked completely confident and comfortable and mature. Very mature performance from Arsenal and the manager. And I just I can't get over it. I'm so glad we went into the international break being able to speak about that win. If they had nicked it, I think we would be in disarray as a fan base. But it's nice to see that, you know, for all the work that went into that win, which there was a lot that went into it, you could tell tactically, physically, mentally, we get to really enjoy it because we won the game. So yeah, I cannot get over it. Like, I'm still on cloud 9. So again, if you guys are still on cloud 9 with me, please take a look at the pod. And if you're a patron, the rewatch it's coming, and it was a lot of fun. Dat official says Osimhen would be my choice. He's up for grabs. Arsenal Adventure says, sorry, I disagree about it. Toney is not better than Jesus, but he is definitely an upgrade on Eddie. Well, we need to upgrade on probably both options from a clinical standpoint. But I think, yeah, Eddie is definitely the one that needs to be upgraded upon. We'll talk a little bit about him because during the rewatch, you know, it was clear that we needed somebody. It's been clear for a while. Christopher says, "What's bizarre story linking us? Wait, what's the bizarre story linking a Jesus swap with Osimhen? I would not do that." Seawalder says, "Not a massive Tony fan, but happy to hear the case for him." Letty says, "Hi, congrats on the win against City. Thank you." TF Payne says, "Ivan Toney is the perfect fit. He brings everything. If we can find a way to give Nketiah for 40 plus 40 million for Tony and add Pedro Neto as well would be fantastic." Zahid says, "I want Osimhen, just not Tony." Paul says, "I don't want Tony anywhere near our club. Ego has been a problem in the past, and I'm afraid that Tony isn't humble enough to fit in with the current culture." Just my 2 cents. Where are we getting this Tony has a bad attitude thing? I've heard this several times, but I've not really read anything or seen anything concrete that would justify this idea that he has a bad attitude. And if we're talking about egos and players that have fallen out and stuff like that, how did you feel about Aubameyang at the club? Because he had a terrible track record of falling out with every single manager and having to leave the club under a cloud. He did the same at Arsenal. And people were very happy to have Aubameyang at the club. So, what was your stance on Aubameyang when he came to us mid-season in January after falling out with Dortmund? And where's the real true evidence of Tony having a bad attitude or whatever? He's confident. He's confident. That's what I could say. And if you don't like the fact that he had a betting addiction and got caught and all that kind of stuff, I can understand that. If you have you don't want players that have, personal issues that, bleed into the career and all that kind of stuff and shed a negative light on the club potentially. But I've seen nothing that suggests that Tony has a bad attitude or will be a bad person to have around the club. In fact, Thomas Frank has spoken very glowingly about Ivan Toney and his attitude and his work ethic and things like that. So I'm wondering where that's coming from if we're not conflating the fact that, he, you know, has the betting problem and we're making it into attitude problem. We're conflating the two because I'm not really seeing that. Really. Christopher says Tony would be my pick. Matt says Tony wouldn't be my first choice. I'd rather wait to the summer when more options are available. Hugo says, just for the record, I'll take Santi Jimenez from Feyenoord. We've also been linked with him. We could talk about him as well. D'Angelo says, Matt G, we need Tony. He has more experience alongside Jesus. So there's some opinions there, which I love. I love differences of opinion because the thing is Ivan Toney has been linked with Arsenal for the last couple of months. And what has come out from Sammy McBell is that, Arsenal very covet Toney very highly. And he also wants to come to Arsenal. Like, I think it's pretty obvious that Ivan Toney wants to come to Arsenal. I think he'll go to Chelsea if we do not come in for him properly. But idealistically, like his choice would be Arsenal, whereas number one choice, his agent is pushing the idea of him coming to Arsenal. And this is exactly what it said from Sammy McBell. A striker, Arsenal are coveting big time. It is understood that Toney is coveting Arsenal as well. On the face of it, Toney is a perfect fit for Arsenal. The goals are a clear selling point, but his character and physicality tick a lot of the boxes for Arteta. So basically, he's the type of striker that Arteta would be interested in. Now, a lot of people are talking about somebody like Osimhen, right? And my only pushback on the Osimhen thing is it doesn't have anything to do with him being, I think he's a fantastic player. He's a superstar, and he's the type of player that takes you into a completely different stratosphere. I think Tony is the type of player that's going to definitely make you better in the short term, but Osimhen is the type of striker that you have for the next 4, 5, 6 seasons and gives you I think he gives you the Drogba effect, somebody that definitely terrorizes the opposition, scores big goals, is a threat all the time, isn't necessarily the most technical player. Like, he's not going to link play, I think, the way that somebody like Ivan Toney would, but the payoff in having somebody like Osimhen is like you're getting 20 something goals, you're getting an absolute killer, and he's younger and probably has a higher ceiling. So, but we haven't been linked to him anytime like recently. And for me, and like, I don't think there's any real signs of Osimhen leaving. I know people assumed he would leave after the entire like, blow up with the TikTok and, the racial situation with Napoli. But ever since then, they've put out a weak ass apology and not even apology. And he's basically said, it's fine, So for me, there's still no indication that he's going to leave. The only thing that Osimhen has not done is signed a new deal with Napoli, so maybe that is an indicator of maybe he's open to going. That being said, we still haven't been linked to him, and we've been heavily linked to Toney, and Toney would be available in January, whereas Osimhen is more of a summer buy. And can Arsenal get through the season with what we have and potentially win the league, win trophies, with what we have? My biggest fear is waiting to the summer to get the striker. Where will we be? Will we be able to attract somebody like Osimhen in the summer if we don't get somebody in January? That's the situation I feel like we put ourselves in. We're relying upon Gabriel Jesus, who's being pushed out wide to accommodate Eddie Nketiah, who's an average player at best. And so the combination of the two, if we're not 100% firing, creating tons of chances every single game, we might just fall short. And will we be able to actually attract somebody like Osimhen? So that's the predicament that I feel like we are in. Toney obviously, wants to come to Arsenal, would improve us in the short term, makes us a much better team from now, like from January to the end of the season and beyond. But Osimhen is like the dream. He's the type of striker that if you put him with Martinelli and Saka, the dreams just start to become realities, I feel like, because he's just that good. He's a star, but Tony's not quite at that level. So it's an interesting one. Um, it's an interesting predicament because it's very difficult for me to see us going through the entire season with what we have and still be an attractive option to the better players that we potentially want. So maybe it's not the idealistic situation. Like, I think some Arsenal fans definitely want perfect settings when it comes to recruitment. They want the perfect player every single time and are very hard on the players that we bring in that aren't necessarily their ideal fit. But they solve our issues, at least in the short term, like a Trossard. Trossard is somebody that I do feel like there is like a subsection of the fan base that don't like him because he wasn't the first choice and he's not as fast and quick as Martinelli. He's definitely not a superstar potentially like Mudryk. He's not somebody that's going to be, in your team for the next 6-7 seasons. But does he do the job and does he make us a better team in the short term and definitely lift the floor and all of that? Yes. Is he better than Nelson? Yes. So I think he's like Toney is kind of a Trossard for us, maybe a little bit more because he could start. But yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in because like obviously you want the perfect signing, but sometimes your past decisions don't allow you to get the best possible option. So you still have to work within your means and work within your situation. Daniel says Ivan Toney is the perfect fit because he bets on himself. Like that. D'Angelo says Reese is good. Anyone is Eddie should be get rid of. Okay, so Reese is as good as anyone, but Eddie is the one that we should get rid of. Frey the Viking says, do you think Toney will rotate with Gabriel Jesus? I think Gabriel Jesus is already being, what's the right word? Transitioned into a wing role. I think Arteta doesn't do anything for shits and giggles. Like, he doesn't just try things for the sake of it. I think there's always a long-term vision with what he's trying to do. And I think there is a good thing with having Eddie up front in a certain way because it requires Arsenal to find different ways of scoring goals. That doesn't require your center forward to be a number 10. I think we were heavily reliant upon Jesus coming deep, coming into midfield, helping us create. And so the situation that we're in now requires a little bit more of midfielders to just kind of do their job and to create and Saka and Martinelli to really create for themselves. Like, it creates a more difficult scenario where, if you have a striker that's not really Gabriel Jesus, that person is probably going to stay up top a little bit more. They're not going to come as deep and create. So Arsenal do have to find different ways of scoring loads of goals without having a number 10 up front. And so I think Arsenal are trying to find ways, basically, how to score goals without having anybody up front. And then once we put somebody up front, they won't be expecting that player to be a midfielder. They'll be creating for another striker, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense in my head that Arsenal can't rely upon Gabriel Jesus to create chances for them and come deep. I think that hurt us a little bit because in games where like you kind of just needed somebody up there to create for, he was never there because he was always so far deep. Like sometimes he was at DM. Have you guys noticed Jesus is not doing that this season? And Eddie's definitely not doing that either. Our number 9 is not coming as deep or being asked to do as much link play as they were last season. So the team is having to try to figure out ways to create and score goals without. And Eddie's doing basically like just a bunch of running and shit up there. So yeah, I think it's fine for us to transition into a team that just has a number 9 that does the business and, doesn't have to create as much. But equally, I feel like Jesus is being put in a role that he will eventually have at Arsenal anyway, which will be another wing role or a second striker or something like that. I don't think Arteta's just doing this for shits and giggles. I think he's has a plan to bring in somebody maybe in January that will be the starting striker. So Jesus's role is going to have to change, but it's still a very important role. Frickin' Jesus against Manchester City. That was an excellent wing display. It was perfect. He was creative, he was direct, he was bullish, he was giving them nightmares. Gvardiol is gonna be waking up in with sweat because he's gonna be thinking about, "Oh my gosh, Jesus, he's by me again. He's nicked it past me. He's all this kind of stuff." So I think he's already being pushed into that role with the idea that they're going to bring in somebody central. And Arsenal also, the players need to learn how to create goals without your number 9 being such an active part of the creation. They need to learn how to create for the striker, which is something that we weren't really doing for Jesus as much. Jesus was basically creating for everybody else. Um, Richie Rabbit says, "Isn't the problem also that we don't create enough good chances?" It is. It is, but that's midfield imbalance. It's a whole other conversation. Um, we don't have as big of a striker problem or a goal scoring problem if we're creating more chances, but it still is a problem because games are very difficult for us. We have to score the perfect goal all the time. It's very difficult for us to just get the easy goals. Like how many goal mouth scrambles or headed goals into the back of the net or, tap ins from cutbacks. How many of those do we really get? The way that we score goals is very difficult. So even if we're creating a lot of those chances, we still don't make it easy on ourselves because we don't we don't score the first goal. We don't just get a goal mouth scramble. Like there's so many times where it just drops in the box and nobody's there. And so even though we have a goal creation problem, like we have a creative issue that's stemming probably from the midfield, that doesn't really mean that like we don't have a striker problem because we do. You know, Jesus, that was only going to work for so long where he was going to drop deep and create. We need to be able to create for a striker that's in the box. And they're trying to do that with Eddie, but it's hard. Eddie's kind of not where he needs to be. He he looked like a little kid yesterday, or when I rewatched the game, he looked like a little kid out there. We need somebody that's going to make the likes of Diaz and Stones and Ake really have to think and really have to, they'll be afraid to just push into midfield because they have this guy up here that we can pop it to. I mean, just think if Raya had had the opportunity to kick it to Tony Long earlier on in the game, like we didn't have that. Eddie was up there. So yeah, we have a creation issue that needs solving. But Arsenal definitely need to graduate from a team that heavily relies upon other players in like positions like center forward and left back to play in midfield for us to be able to create chances. I do think we need a midfield 3 that does all the midfielding. I think the inversion is becoming a little bit heavily relied upon, and Jesus coming deep was definitely being heavily relied upon. So there's just things that we have to change, or we need to move forward, if that makes sense, change how we do things. Tech Forward says Arsenal does not create enough chances for Eddie nor Jesus. Doesn't matter. Just even when we were creating chances, I think we knew that we needed to be able to score 2 or 3 goals quickly, put games away. There were still games last season where, especially towards the end, where we just kinda needed to score 2 goals, and put the game away, but it took our too many chances to have to score just 1 or 2 goals. So, we still have a clinical finishing problem, like, it's there, just because there's another problem doesn't mean that this one doesn't exist. And if we're creating chances like this with Toney, he's not gonna score enough goals, so I get that, but we need a striker. That is very, very clear. Off of the last 7, 9, 8 games, whatever, um, we just have like a big gaping hole central. There's nobody there. As hard as Eddie is working, he's just kind of anonymous in a lot of games. And so he doesn't create enough threat. We need a striker, period. It's something that I wasn't completely sold on in the summer, but it's definitely something that we need to do. Like I'm definitely 100% on board with the striker now. Simon says, "Why can't we set some bar that being Martinelli and nothing below that? Does Toney qualify? Why can't we set some bar that being Martinelli and nothing below that? Does Toney qualify? No." I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. If you can clarify that a little bit for me. Tech Forward says we might need to upgrade on Odegaard. The thing is last season when Martinelli was going through a bad patch of form, people started talking about we needed to upgrade upon Martinelli. He wasn't good enough. We need Matoma. We need this player. We need this player. Now we can't live without Martinelli. The reality is good players go through bad runs of form. And every single time one of our players, whether it's Saka or Martinelli or Odegaard, go through a bad run of form, we start talking about upgrading upon them. Get used to good players going through bad patches of form. Every player goes through it. Odegaard is going through a bad patch of form. But this is somebody that was probably 1 or 2, like, top 1, top 2 of our best players over the last 2 seasons. Now, all of a sudden, we need to upgrade upon him because he's going through a difficult time. I'm not buying it. Do the same thing with Martinelli last season around January. People wanted him out, thought he was crap, "Oh my gosh, we need to go get so and so." He's fine. Odegaard will come back into form, like, first of all, the midfield is not even clicking at all anyway, so I can understand more if it was the same midfield as last season and Odegaard was performing the way that he is now, but you can't sit there and say that we have midfield imbalance, our midfield is not clicking, and then look at Odegaard and say, "You know what, we need to upgrade upon you because you're going through a bad run of form." Odegaard is one of the best players in this team. Like, there's much more that we should be looking to upgrade before we even start looking at Odegaard. Um, it's just a nonsense. But people focus on the wrong things all the time. Like, he just is going through a bad run of form. Every player goes through it. Now, if Odegaard goes through an entire season like this, then I could understand. But it's been like it's not even halfway through the season. It's like not even a quarter through the season yet. And people want Odegaard out. Rest. Rest. Kevin says, "Hi, Jess. Miss you cooking ops on the terrace. I'll be back on the terrace soon, I promise. But thank you so much for your super chat. I need to go on there and show my face. I need to go on there and show my face." Arsenal Adventure says, we do need to upgrade on Odie unless he can learn how to use zone 14 well and do deep lying center mid role well. It's amazing how you can go from last season being one of your best players to now this season, and all of a sudden you need to upgrade upon him. Very strange, but he had. If you rewatch the second half of the game against Manchester City, he actually had a good second half. He was a little bit more quiet in the first half, but I get that Odegaard is like the main villain right now. People want him out. Um, good luck getting the captain out of the team. Good luck. People tried this before as well, like with ESR years ago. And guess who's still in the team? Odegaard's not going anywhere. Boy says to complete this team, we need a right wing, a center forward, and a CM who plays in both directions. I think if we had a balanced midfield, you'd probably see the best out of one of our better midfielders. Like, I don't know how you can watch what we've been seeing with Kai Havertz in midfield, and then be like, "Oh, well, Odegaard needs to be replaced." How about we solve the problem at left center mid first and then see what happens with Odegaard? When we played in the Community Shield, Odegaard was very good. We had Thomas Partey and Declan Rice in there. I don't know. I don't know how much more obvious it needs to be. Like, I don't know. I feel like We always are ready to kick the better players and get them out of the team, but we never really see that, like, there's other shit going on. It's so strange. Like, at the same time, like, I don't know. Just so Daniel is saying, like, okay, Odegaard was taking some wild shots last match though. So, have you not seen Martinelli take bad shots or Jesus not take a shot, or like he took some bad shots? That happens. Like, come on, be serious. But yeah, it's I don't know how we got into Odegaard, but um I'll tell you this right now that if Odegaard went to any other team, he would play. Like any other top team, he would play. He's one of our only players that gets anywhere near the City team, probably Saka as well. He can play in any top team at this stage, and if he went there, you guys would be sucking him off. You guys would be, "Oh my gosh, we need to have this Odegaard guy." Now you have him in your team, and now you want him out because he had a couple of bad games. Like, it's wild to me. But then also, it's you let rivals rattle you, and then you start kicking your own players, and you start saying Saka's not really that good. Look at him, he's a one-trick pony. Martinelli's not really that good. So and so's not really that good. I I'm gonna be so honest with you guys. I'm not turning my back on Odegaard. So this is a Odegaard positive, channel. Sorry, I'm not doing it. Mister says Odegaard is a Bernardo Silva profile. Like Cal says, Odegaard has been immense in his captaincy. Is his captaincy? I question so much load on a young shoulder. Shane says if Arteta continues to play logical football and we get Toney and Neto in January, the Prem and the UCL is ours this season. I don't know where you guys are getting this idea that we're going to get 2 players in January. I don't know who. I think the thing is like we're hoping and praying that Arsenal will uh go and get these 2 players. I get that we got Jorginho and Trossard, but I don't think we're gonna go into the January transfer window when we have FFP problems without one having like, we have to sell. We're not good at selling anyway, but we have to sell. And you think we're gonna bring in 2 players? Y'all, I think we need to temper our expectations. If we got one of Neto or Toney, that would be great. This is Arsenal we're talking about. Like, we're just not typically this team, you know? Let's see. Agetcha says we will need outgoings if that's going to happen. Exactly. And again, like we had all summer to try to sell players and we still failed miserably to move on players properly, which is why we couldn't even really buy Raya and why we had to do like this Klarna deal for Raya is because we have FFP problems. We need to move some guys on for significant fees. That's where the likes of like Emil Smith Rowe and Eddie Nketiah come in. Now, what worries me just a little bit is that Arteta's playing Eddie a lot. And a lot of times I feel like Arteta makes statements with the players that he plays and the players that he doesn't play. And he gives Eddie the freaking captain's armband against Monaco in preseason. He, plays, he's resting him for the Manchester City game. He's starting every single Premier League game. Is he going to fight Arsenal if a bid comes in from a team for Eddie? We have got to let go of Eddie now. Like, Eddie is a good player that would be great at a mid-table team, but going through the entire season with him being our main starting striker is not going to work. When's the last time Eddie scored a goal, by the way? Was the last time he scored a goal against Crystal Palace? When's the last time Eddie scored a goal? Last time Eddie scored a goal. Was it against Fulham? That's a long time ago. It was either no, it wasn't. He didn't even score against Crystal Palace. So it must have been Fulham. You know how long ago that was? Like, no, man. We got to move him on, or it's going to be ESR. One of those two. I don't think Reece Nelson has enough value in the market. But again, you have to be willing to let these players go. And Arteta's very like, he loves Eddie so much, and it's a blind spot for him. So, like, Eddie should have been moved on ages ago. The fact that he's a starter at Arsenal right now and we're moving our best number 9 wide for him and not playing Reece Nelson, a player that we gave a contract to, is very telling of how highly Arteta rates this player. And that's what worries me is like, it's just so obvious that we need to move him on. So yeah, Boy says if we got Kudus, then we would probably only need like one more player. Likewise, if we get Xavi Simmons, unlucky. It's not unlucky. It's just bad recruitment in certain circumstances. Like if it turns out that Kai Havertz is just a number 9 and he can't really play the 8 role, we will have wasted, like, that's the money that we could have used for Toney. Because if he can only play number 9, we didn't need to buy him. We needed either a left center mid or a striker, a real striker. So if we spent 65 million on a player that ends up just being able to play number 9, that's bad recruitment. That's not unlucky. Um, it's just poor. We got it wrong. Lion Knight says upgrade Odie with ESR. Don't make me laugh. Rep 187 says we couldn't even buy Rhea because of FFP. Exactly. So temper your expectations, y'all. This is Arsenal. Temper your expectations. This is our club. We know that we're not going to buy 2 players. If anything, we'll get 1. If we can sell, and if Brentford are interested in Eddie and Nketiah, it's the perfect scenario. It's whether or not Arteta allows it to happen. We don't owe Eddie anything. Like, Eddie is Hale End, I get it, but he's on a good contract. He's had so much time in the last 2 seasons, or like second half of last season and the beginning of this season. He's played a lot of minutes. Like, it's fine. Like, just let him go start somewhere where he can be a star for that team. Like, it's not happening now. Like, it's not happening here. Shane says, let's just get out Eddie, Cedric, Elneny, and Reese. Yeah, let's do that before we start talking about moving Odegaard on. You guys sound absolutely out of your freaking minds talking about getting rid of Odegaard because a couple of rival fans started bantering you about how Madison is better. Stand up. Stand up. This guy's been one of your best players for the last 2 seasons. Stand up. Ify says, apart from Odegaard shooting in the City match, he did what a midfielder should do. I'm seeing some bad takes here. You said it, not me. I mean, I think some people just go with whatever's popular online and they're like, yeah, like Odegaard, he's a center midfielder. Yes, you want him to create more chances and he took some bad shots, but the real issue that we have in midfield is that it's imbalanced. Let's see if we can balance that out first. If he's playing in a midfield with Thomas Partey and Rice, I do think Odegaard will play a lot better. I think he'll be able to just focus on his job and not have to try to do 5 jobs at once. But yeah, we'll see how things pan out. I think a lot of people will be taking this stuff back when he comes back into form. But I remember who said what. Philip says, if we want Havertz out of the midfield, he's going to be our striker. He's a clear upgrade on Eddie. Wing is where we're screaming out for depth, in my opinion. 2 proper wingers isn't enough. Nelson not trusted. And so you can go in 2 different directions. I agree with you. You could play the rest of the season with Havertz up top as a different option to Jesus, but and then bring in somebody like Pedro Neto, who I think if you miss out on Toney, you have other options in the summer that you can look at. If you miss out on Neto, the options become very sketchy. Like, who's available? You can look at Kubo, who's great. But if you miss out on Neto, everybody will start looking at Kubo. And then the other option that seems like it could open up is somebody like Leroy Sané, who's playing his best football since being at Bayern. And there's rumors that he's available in the summer. But how can you get him to come back to London when he was clearly running away from England a couple of years ago? So the options are not really there where, if you miss out on Toney, it's a big miss, but it's not the end of the world because you have somebody like Sesko. You could look at Ferguson if you're willing to really spend the money. You can try to get Osimhen. Like, there's other options out there where I feel like right wing there's very little options out there. So you could go in that direction, but equally, won't Arsenal just say, you know what, if what's stopping Arsenal from saying, yeah, we're just going to play Havertz there and just move Jesus to the wing and not bring in anybody? I really do think Arsenal need to be smart. Arsenal cannot be that silly and not bring in anybody in January. They have to at least try. So yeah, Shantae says, y'all, we will not make turn my back on Martin. I'm sorry. A lot of this stuff is going to look really silly in a couple of weeks. People will be, oh, I don't remember I said that. Like, I remember that some of you guys are saying we need to move Odie on or upgrade upon him. Like, he's not one of the best in his position. And if you want to upgrade upon him, you're going to need to go get Bellingham or somebody like that. Like, you're going to have to go out there and get, like, it's very difficult to upgrade on some of our players at this stage. Saka being one of them, Odegaard, very hard to upgrade upon Saliba. Um, very, very difficult. It's hard to upgrade upon Declan Rice. Like, it was hard to upgrade upon Partey. In order to upgrade upon Partey, you had to bring Declan Rice in. It's very difficult. So you want to go find somebody else, be my guest, tell me all the players that could upgrade upon Odie. You probably find 3, maybe. And they're probably already at really, really good clubs. So move on from it. Yo-Yo says Arteta could possibly be flattened up the pig for slaughter. I doubt it, but Eddie could be sold. Yeah, you could say that he's playing Eddie a lot early on in the season in order to get eyes on him so that he's ready to be sold in January. But knowing Arteta, like you've said it before, Yo-Yo, many times, that Eddie is not going anywhere because Arteta loves Eddie. So it could be that. I'm hoping that it's that, but my gut is telling me that he's showing the club that he really rates Eddie and he trusts him. It's time to move on from him. It's time. Like, he looked like a little kid out there yesterday, like where Jesus was like really good, Martinelli, Thomas when he came on, Rice, Odegaard in the second half, Ben, Saliba, Gabriel. They all looked like they belonged on that pitch against Manchester City, but couldn't help but watch Eddie and just feel like he's kind of stands out, like, as somebody that, you know, should he be here? Could Arsenal, we would have flattened them out if we had somebody else up top. That's the truth. Um, Dewanda says the quality is low when it comes to the fringe players. This they aren't sought out for by clubs in general. Easy says Arteta has no emotional attachment to any player. He'll upgrade on Eddie in a heartbeat. Mikel is a smiling savage. Hmm. Do I agree with this? I think he's ruthless for some players and he's not with others. I kind of agree with you, but you know, I do think that he finally got ruthless with Rob Holding, somebody that should have been moved on ages ago, that was playing too big of a role in a team that had too much to lose. And he finally got up the courage to move his boy on, get rid of the glue, or whatever they were calling him. But Eddie, if he were like, I'll agree with you that he's a smiling savage and he has no emotional attachment to any player if he moves Eddie on in January. That is the test. Because Eddie is an average guy that he's playing loads of minutes, he's resting for big matches and moving his best number 9 out wide to accommodate. If he gets rid of Eddie, I will believe you. I will believe him. The wheel says maybe Arteta's playing him to raise his value. It has to. It has to be that. Michael says, I hear the Toney talk, but I think Neto in January is way more important. Um, I mean, what's the better option? I mean, because you still got to move somebody on. So, if you want to bring in Neto, I still don't think Reece Nelson will go because Reece Nelson just doesn't have as much value as, like, and Nelson just signed a new deal as well in the summer. So I'm not quite sure that it's Nelson. It's either Eddie or ESR. But let's play the game, right? So we're able to move somebody on, and let's say it's ESR because he's the lowest down the pecking order as far as I'm concerned. So ESR has moved on to who knows where. Maybe we sell him to Wolves, who knows. So then your options become Neto, Saka, Martinelli out wide, Trossard. And then your center forward options, let's say there's still Eddie, Jesus, and Havertz. Do you feel like that gets us over the line with the goals that we, set early on in the season? Um, we said we wanted to be in a title race, win a trophy, make sure that we go far in the Champions League, at least quarterfinal. That's what I was saying. Some people are saying major trophy. Is just bringing in Neto, a player that probably doesn't start every single game, a bigger impact than bringing in somebody like Toney that instantly starts? You see what I'm saying? So Neto is a, like, there's opportunity cost to not bringing in Neto because you're not going to get anywhere near him in the summer. But I think that there is more impact in January if you bring in Toney. So it's whether you're thinking about the future and you're okay with risking this season for a player that's you're not going to get in the summer, or you'll have a difficult time getting in the summer in Neto? Or are you going to secure this season with a player that's actually going to be in the starting 11, and and not really be securing the future as much? So I think that's the question that we're really posing here is, Tony is a starter. He comes straight in January and starts starting games. Then you can move Jesus out wide, and that could get you over the line until the summer. Neto is great, but it's not like Jesus is not a world-class player in his own right. So is Tony not the better option? Because it eliminates the idea of Eddie completely. You secure the goal situation. You have Jesus that can move out wide. Maybe you do miss out on Neto in the summer, but you don't risk this season that's so important, because it's a slippery slope, to me. I think not scoring enough goals is really the difference between being in a title race or being in a, top 4 scrap. And so if we're not scoring enough goals and we end up finishing 4th or worse, are you are you really going to be in a position to attract the people that you want in the summer? So, it's a difficult one. I still don't really know how I feel about it, because I don't want to miss out on somebody like Neto. But equally, I don't wanna risk this season. I'm not sure that going into the rest of the season with just Jesus and Havertz and Eddie as your center forward options and bringing in Neto that's not even gonna start. Like, he's not gonna start over Saka or Martinelli. So we'll have him just in case one of them gets injured. But what if Saka and Martinelli don't get any more injuries for the rest of the season? Then you have Neto on the bench, but you still have Eddie and Havertz and Jesus as your striker options. So you're still kind of in the same situation. Um, so I think a lot of the Neto going in the front of the queue comes from the Saka injury, concerns. But if Saka doesn't get that many injuries to the end of the season, and you buy a striker and Jesus can move out wide, is that not the better option? Shane says, let's do a swap deal plus cash with Brentford to get Toney. Yule says Jesus is better as a striker. He brings out the best in Martinelli and Saka, and Toney doesn't start over Jesus for me. Ivan Toney doesn't start over Gabriel Jesus as center forward. That's interesting. That's interesting. Jesus is a better player than Toney, but Toney is a better striker than Jesus. Clear distinction. Jesus is a world-class player. You can throw him in the midfield, you can throw him at number 10, you can throw him up top, throw him on the wing. He's going to give you world-class play with his technical ability, the flair, the physicality, the intelligence, everything. But Toney is a better striker than Jesus. So Toney doesn't start ahead of Jesus Central? And can Toney not do some of the things in terms of creation that Jesus can do? Because I've seen Toney put the ball on a platter for Mbomo. So interesting. Prime says, this is what I'm saying the other day. Toney in January, physically and finishing ability, he raises the bar for us. Arsenal Adventure says, just in my opinion, we need a more robust midfield. Partey is class, but he's injury prone. So January for me, left center mid, and Saliba apparently playing injured since Spurs. So we need a center back. Diamande is the dude. I think we need to look forward. I think we've kind of we've kind of done midfield over the summer, whether you like it or not, and defense. Um, we really need to focus on those forward positions, I think, in January. If you can, like, spending 60, 70 million on Diomande, who, if Saliba or Gabriel does not get an injury, doesn't really get that many games, doesn't feel like the best use of January is to, I think, reinforce the squad for the season that's happening right this moment. So if in January we get there and everybody is still fit, and you have, Tommy, and you have Kiwi, and you have all these guys that can play center back but also fullback, and Saliba and Gabriel are fit, then spending 60, 70 million knowing that Timber is going to come back for a center back is I feel like not the best use of that money, when in January we'll probably be looking for goals. That's probably what we'll be looking for. Um, I get that people are frustrated by this center midfield positions, but I think internally we can solve our midfield issues better than what we can do up front. And I don't think we can solve our goal scoring issues or clinical finishing with what we have like from an internal solution. I think we need to buy somebody. But in terms of midfield, if you get to January, you can figure out a midfield with Arsenal right now with what we have that's better than what we're doing right now. It happened against City. We played Jorginho and Rice and Odegaard, and we were much better in that game against the best opposition that you can come up against than we had been in pretty much any other game. Party's coming back. You know, for me personally, you solve center midfield, especially because you spend almost 200 million on midfield anyway. So to put more resources there, I feel like it's a waste. Just drop Havertz and play your best midfield. We all know what it is. And go out there in the market and buy a striker. I feel like that's the better use of funds. If we come out of the January transfer window with a defender, I think we're doing things backwards. I think we're doing things backwards. I think you could buy another center defender in the summer. You know, EO says our main problem isn't scoring goals. We've scored 5 less goals than Brighton, who have the most, 1 less than City, 2 less than free scoring Liverpool. We just shouldn't just need to stop giving away easy goals. Fair enough. If you don't think we have a goal scoring issue, fair enough. But the sources of our goals have been quite interesting because a lot of them have been, not from open play. So I think that is something to look at. It's a good thing that Arsenal have different ways of scoring goals, and we've done that on purpose. That's why we work on our set pieces. We try to get into dangerous positions so that we can win penalties. So I'm not taking that away, but I do think at some point during the season, you want your expected goals to be closer to the goals that you're actually scoring. Right now, our expected goals is closer to 10. So, I think you want to be closer to the number that you actually have. You know what I'm saying? So I get what you're saying that it's not that we've scored so many less. I do think we have to make sure that we're in situations like we are in with like against Spurs, that we put them away, because that is the difference, I think, between winning the league and not, is it could end up being the 2 points that we dropped against Spurs because, Gabriel Jesus couldn't put it in the back of the net. I think our goal scoring needs to be easier because also if you score more goals and you score them quicker, the easier goals, then you get to rotate more and things like that. So there's other factors to goal scoring other than just, oh my God, we have exactly the same amount or just one less than what we had last season. It's how you're getting the goals, how difficult it is for us to score them. And for us, it's fine margins. And I can't stop thinking about the Spurs first half and how we had them on toast, we had them on the ropes. And instead of, being 3-0 up in the first half, we ended up at 1-1 and ended up drawing the game. That missed chance from Gabriel Jesus is everything you need to know about Arsenal. It's the same thing that was happening at the back end of last season where the goals were starting to be more difficult to come by. We're snatching at shots. We're not clinical enough. It's just that's kind of where I'm at. So goal scoring may not be our main issue, but it's still an issue. And that's the reason why Arsenal are being linked to strikers, because Arsenal also know that we need a striker. And solve an issue before it becomes a real issue as well. Like, be proactive. We shouldn't buy a striker, next summer after we went through a second half of the season really struggling to score goals. Like, be proactive. We know at some stage we'll need something different up front to give us a plan B. We know that. So just be proactive and do it. So yeah, I hear your point. Jacob says Toney doesn't start ahead of Jesus. Toney is not an Osimhen. You don't have to be an Osimhen to start above a striker that's not clinical, though. I get that. I feel like people are being disingenuous with the idea that Toney doesn't start over Jesus at center forward for Arsenal. Just because he's not Osimhen doesn't mean that he's not a better striker than Jesus. Jesus is a world-class player, but in terms of being a striker, he will never be considered one of the best strikers in the world because he's not clinical. And you can pull up all the stats about, oh, Toney only scored 3 more non-penalty goals than Jesus last season. Jesus was playing in a team that was creating hella chances. Toney was at Brentford. So he shouldn't be anywhere near Jesus as far as I'm concerned. Just imagine Toney in a team that has Saka in it and Martinelli in it, or Jesus out wide creating chances for him and Odegaard behind him, rather than who do they have? Mbomo, Wissa, players like that. So, yeah, I'm not buying this idea that Toney doesn't start at center forward for Arsenal because Toney is not Osimhen. Like, that's to me, that's being disingenuous. Richie says Tony's clearly a better center forward. Yeah, he's not the better player, but he's definitely the better striker. I think I don't know, you know, is that like a hot take? Because I'm seeing people say like, no. Is that a hot take? I don't know. Y'all tell me. Prime Henri says Jesus is a quality player, but not clinical enough. This is what I agree with for sure. Penal Dog says Tony creates, Harry Kane light. He does create. I think that's why Arsenal are linked with him, by the way. I think Arteta probably does want a striker that is not just a target man, because Arsenal just, then that takes him out of so many different games. I think you need the amount of deep blocks that we come up against. We need somebody that can operate in some smaller areas, that has a little bit more of that about them. Like Toney would definitely give you the direct outlet in away games against Liverpool or Man City and stuff like that. Like even against Man City, we could have used a more direct outlet at some stages, but you need to also have somebody that can play ball with us. Osimhen, I think he's worth giving up that, by the way. I think if you could get Osimhen, it's worth giving up the idea of having a striker that has to be able to create. But I think idealistically, you know, Arteta is going to want somebody that can drop a little bit deeper, do a little bit of the Jesus stuff, but is going to put the ball in the back of the net and score the easy goals, because we're not getting the easy goals. I think you watch a comp of Ivan Toney, what you're going to see is you're going to see free kicks, which we don't have. We don't have a single player in our team that is a dead ball specialist. We need one. You're going to see penalties put away. So no more of this switching between 4 or 5 players. We're going to have one guy put it in the back of the net almost 99% of the time. And what you're also going to see is easy tap-ins. You're going to see scrambles in the box and Toney come up with the ball, and put it in the back of the net. You're going to see one-touch finishes, which we don't seem to be able to do at this stage. We want to walk it into the back of the net. So goal scoring becomes easier with Toney. No, it's not the best one touch, kind of like Gabriel Jesus wiggling between all these players. But how many times have you seen Gabriel Jesus get into the box and try to beat 4 or 5 players instead of just kicking it in the back of the net? Toney's not going to do that. He's just going to smash it in the back of the net. We need that. So he has a lot of things to his game. What he doesn't have is probably the age that Arsenal fans want. Arsenal fans, for some reason, want us to forever be a team that's the youngest team in the league. It's bullshit, y'all. Every single player doesn't need to be a child in the team. And they also want somebody that is the superstar, the perfect striker for the squad building project. Sometimes you don't get the perfect player. Look at Liverpool, by the way. I just want to point out the fact that they have been able to rebuild their team from a midfield standpoint in one window, despite not getting some of their top targets. They wanted Mason Mount. They didn't get Mason Mount. They went after Alexis McAllister. They went after Thuram. They couldn't get Thuram. They got Soboslai. They couldn't get either Lavia or Caicedo, and they got who? What's his name? Endo. Liverpool have already rebuilt their shit without always getting their number one target or the perfect target or the perfect age profile, the perfect this, the perfect that, because it fits on my, in my galaxy brain because I'm sitting on Twitter doing it. Squad building is not perfect, but you still have to make sure that it's not always about getting your number one choice all the time. You have 4 or 5 options that fit your budget, what you need, profile, and you pick the one that you can get. Sometimes it's just that simple. And so, no, we may not get Osimhen. And that's what people have felt like all this time. We were gearing up for Osimhen. But, we could have gotten Vlahovic. We ended up with Jesus and we're fine. Like, it's not that deep. Toney is not going to collapse the squad building. He's not going to end what we're trying to do. He's is the idea that Tony doesn't come into this team and absolutely make us a better team is a fallacy. He just doesn't have the superstar quality of an Osimhen or the time. He's not. That's it. That doesn't mean you don't go get him. Doesn't mean you don't go get him. Kevin says Tony is a goal scorer and a target man. Jesus is none of that. C. Walter says, I know I've said it before, but Tony is only millimeters better than Laka. Same type of player. I don't know about this. I don't know about this. Lacazette was an abomination. And the thing about Lacazette is to liken him to Tony is taking away the idea that he's a physical player. Like he has the physicality, the size to do things that Lacazette could never do. So I don't really understand the comparison. If you're saying they're on the same level as like Lacazette was just one level below like the elite strikers, I could probably get behind that. But the idea that there's nothing about Lacazette and Toney about the way that they play the game that's similar because Toney is a physical striker. No, I don't agree. He's just not Osimhen, and I think that that's where we start to become like because he's not Osimhen, he's a pauper. Because he's not Osimhen, he's basically the same as Eddie. So don't get him. I just, that's like saying because you couldn't get Mudryk, don't get Trossard for me. You still need to go get Trossard. Yeah, Trossard may not be, a superstar, but he definitely makes your ass better, so I'm not really buying the, you know, Toney is the same as Lacazette thing, or he doesn't start over Jesus in the center forward position. I feel like it's an overreaction to the idea that you don't really want Toney because he's not Osimhen. That doesn't mean you don't get Toney. What's the idea? What is the likelihood of us getting Osimhen anyway? Has anybody seen a link? Has he even? Is it even a certainty that he's gonna leave? Like, come on, y'all. Yo-Yo says, don't rate Toney at all, but I like the idea of finally replacing Abba with a golden boot caliber forward. What don't you like about him? I would love to hear that. True Gunner says, your title says Toney would be perfect for us. I do think, I think he ticks a lot of boxes. Does he have everything that I would want? No. I still would probably want somebody younger. Um, and that's probably about it. There's nothing else about Toney's game that I don't really like. I know something else that people don't like about Toney is he's not fast. I think that's something that people pointed out is that we need more speed. But I think your speed can actually exist on the wings. Like if you were to bring in Neto in the summer, you already have Martinelli. Your speed can be in the wings. It doesn't have to be through your striker. So I don't actually think that that's that big of a deal either. And how many times do we have space in behind anyway? How many times do we have space in behind? We're playing against deep block after deep block after deep block after deep block. So when we need to be direct, we can have that on the wings. But does it have to be with your striker? No. So yeah, I don't know. For me, I don't believe that squad building has to be perfect. I don't think you have to always get your number and first of all, this is our number one target in our head, by the way. Osimhen is the number one target in our heads, not in Arsenal's heads. But let's say that Arsenal are interested in Osimhen, but they end up going for Toney. It's not the end of the world. We wouldn't be the first team, or this wouldn't be the first time that we go after somebody that's not the number one guy in the position and still do great, so it's not that big of a deal to me. Personally, I just don't want to see us going through the entire season acting like Nketiah, Havertz, and Jesus is going to get us over the line because they're not. So yeah, make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel, by the way. There's 150 of you guys in here, and make sure you guys read the ticker at the bottom because it's giving you guys all the information of what's going on She Knows Arsenal in the next couple of days. The post-match podcast with Femi is available everywhere. Audio, YouTube, Patreon. You guys can watch it and listen to it there. Wednesday, Colleen will be on the show. Thursday, Lee Judges will be on the show. And for the Patreon pod coming out on Monday, Dan Potts will be the guest. So make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, signing up for Patreon if you want to, because we're just keeping the ball rolling here. Yo-Yo says, genuinely believe sorting out the midfield would have unleashed Martinelli and Saka. Arteta Edu only had one job to do this past summer. It could still be done. I still don't think that as much as I know that the Havertz situation is looking like, what have we done? We still have great midfield options. Like, and we've seen that yesterday against Manchester City. Rice in the second half playing in a more advanced role was very, very good. And if anybody would have looked up the times that this is the thing about Jesus too, is he had two opportunities to find Rice like in the box and he chose to continue to dribble. Rice can score goals if we find him. Rice can score goals if we find him. He was progressing the ball well. His passing was crisp. I think we have an internal solution if we would just humble ourselves and just, be like, you know what, Havertz ain't working there. Because the longer that we try to make that shit work, the more it stinks. Like, I actually think Havertz doesn't even feel comfortable there because look at how he looked at the 9 position. He looks so much more comfortable. So just put it away for a minute. The Havertz at left center mid. Just play Declan Rice there and play Partey or Jorginho. And I think Martinelli and Saka will thrive. They did mess up, I think, with the Havertz situation, or it seems like they may have made a mistake, but that doesn't mean that all is lost. We have buying Declan Rice is a masterstroke because the guy can actually play at a very high level in multiple positions. He can't. It's not just he can do a job there. Like he looked the business in midfield, like advanced. He was advanced on the right. He was advanced on the left. If you guys have not rewatched the second half when Declan Rice goes forward, I think you should because he was it. He looked really good. Lady says, in my view, I think midfield is really where we need to bulk on. If someone like Rice gets injured, we'll all of a sudden look light. Um, we've already bought 2 midfielders. We have several guys that we're not even using, but right now we don't have a single clinical number 9. So for me, even though we could get an injury and then have to rely upon Jorginho and Thomas Partey, which is not that bad. Let's keep it 100. Right now, if Jesus gets injured, we're looking at Nketiah for the rest of the season. So for me, do I think it's a bigger problem if we're looking at Partey and Jorginho for the rest of the season or Eddie and Havertz for the rest of the season? We need a striker more than we need a midfielder. Like, people are very heavily like focused on midfield, but we have lots of midfield options. Right now, we don't have much going on up front. And to me, that seems like something that we can't solve internally at all. So striker definitely has to get sorted out. Maybe we can look at midfield again in the summer, but we've already put a lot of resources into midfield. I think we have to figure out how to get the most out of Jorginho, Partey, Rice. But by the way, we're talking about getting the most out of Jorginho, Partey, Rice, Odegaard, and Vieira and ESR. That is not like if Arteta can't figure out what to do with that, then he shouldn't be managing Arsenal because some managers would kill for that level of like depth and quality. Figure it out and go buy a striker. Yassine says, just do you still believe Arsenal could win the league, even though we got 2 defeats in the Premier League? We will turn things around after international break. We are still favorites by 90%. I mean, the thing is like you guys should be favorites. And like the thing is all the pressure is on Arsenal, but actually like you guys are the favorites. So you guys lost the 2 games. Whatever, you guys will get better after Rodri comes back, like in the next couple of games, I think, or after the next game. And KDB will eventually be back. So I think we have a chance to win the league, but you guys are still the favorites, but that's not any news. The holders are always still the favorites. So yeah, it is what it is. Yo-Yo says, remember when we signed Abba after Laka? This is why I never wanted Jesus initially. People were saying he's better than Laka, but that wasn't the standard. The bar is golden boot caliber. I hear what you're saying. But I understand. The thing was, though, is like, should we have not bought anybody, though? Because like Vlahovic had already rejected us. So what are you going to do with that? Isak, we tried to get him in January, but something happened. He ended up going to Newcastle. So I don't know who else was available at that time. Scamacca? Do you think Scamacca was the up? Like, I think we went for something that we knew would work for a certain amount of time. And then if, when we decided to upgrade, there's still a role for him. The difference between Jesus and Lacazette is that Lacazette could not play another position at a high level and was not a world-class player. He was an average guy that could only play striker in League One. So I understand the likeness to the situation because buying Jesus was always short term. Like Zinchenko is also short term. At a certain like next season, neither of them will be starting for us, which is, it is what it is. But both of them still add quite a bit of value to the squad where Lacazette needed to be sent off because he's just not, he couldn't do anything else. So I hear what you're saying, but I think it was a smart idea that if we couldn't get who we really wanted in terms of the physical number 9 that we wanted, that we wait for the one to come up that we really want. But in the meantime, we bring somebody in that we know can up our level considerably because Jesus and Zinchenko were the reason why we became basically title contenders in one season. We went from 5th place team to 2nd place team very quickly. But Jesus also adds incredible quality to the squad, and it's not like we have to get rid of Jesus or he's holding us back or anything like that. So I think if you move on Eddie and you bring in the number 9 that you want, and Jesus plays, he's the backup striker but also plays the wing. It's not similar to Laka at all. Lacazette had no value to the squad once he wasn't, once Aubameyang came in. None. But Jesus, like if Toney comes in, Jesus still has immense quality in the squad. So I get what you're saying, but I still don't think Jesus was like a waste of money or, anything like that. Joel says, wasn't Jesus' main position at City on the right and then right for Brazil? I think he should rotate with Saka there and play other games in the middle. Uncle Ruckus says, will Toney work as a hard in the press? Is he just Eddie with goals? The last few matches, Odegaard has throws his hands up in frustration at Eddie not pressing. Is he just Eddie with goals? Again, it's almost as if we're not watching with our eyes. If you watch Toney play, Toney doesn't look like a little boy when he's playing against Manchester City. He gives them an absolute nightmare. He gave us a nightmare at the Emirates last season. So what are we asking? Toney, even if he doesn't press, there's no comparison between Eddie and Nketiah and Toney. None whatsoever. And Nketiah has went how many games has he went now without scoring a goal or looking threatening or being an absolute like zero out there? Toney is never going to be an afterthought in a game with Arsenal. So yeah, I'm like, well, we can talk about the pressing and stuff later and whether or not he can, I don't know, maybe I'll look at some of Brighton's games or Brentford's games and see whether or not they press the way that we do. I think they do press sometimes the way that we do, but not all the time, right? They're not going to press as much as us. But the constant like is he just Eddie with a couple of goals? Is he, he's not that much better than Jesus, he's not Osimhen, so he's basically Lacazette. I do think we're a little arrogant as a fan base, I think. We feel like, we should only be shopping at, Bergdorf's because or whatever high-end, store. We ain't been in Champions League for 6 or 7 seasons, but we should be getting Osimhen and Frankie de Jong and this player, and they should be leaving teams that have been in Champions League for years for us. And, we're just going to have 100 million hanging around when we had to do Klarna for Rice and David Raya. Toney upgrades us by quite a bit, y'all. Like, we may want to be Bergdorf's now, but maybe we can go to like a Nordstrom's right now. It's fine. Like, the way people are talking about Toney, I feel like is incredibly disrespectful for a player that we've watched over the last 2 seasons just absolutely bully people, play in big games and absolutely bully them. Like, also Trossard has scored against like every single top 6 team, and I hear people talking about him like he's a bum. Like he's a bum. Like, I I think we're a little arrogant, y'all. I think we're a little arrogant. I'm gonna keep it 100 with y'all. I think we're a little arrogant. And yes, we're Arsenal, but we're also Arsenal. Let's, Toney is not somebody that we should be Toney is not somebody that we should be turning our nose up at. That's what I'll say. You may want Osimhen, but Toney is not somebody that we should be turning our nose up at. When we got Eddie and Nketiah starting for Arsenal right now. Philip says, Trossard is also being forgotten about as false 9. His best performances have come from here. Jesus is top 5 right wing in the league. Mudryk type goal scoring left wing coming in at 70 minutes would help, plus vital depth. Hugo says Santi Jimenez, Dani Olmo, Neto, and Diamande from Lisbon. We're not getting all that in January, but I hear you. The Santi Jimenez guy, he looks like the type of striker that like a Brighton would go for. Brentford or something, and turn him into a star, and then they'd sell him for a lot. That's what he looks like to me. Is he ready to come straight into Arsenal and lead the line? I don't know. But, I watched Ferguson the other day and I was like, nobody's talking about this guy. Like, for somebody that people were dead set was the next Harry Kane, and they were willing to spend 120 plus million on this guy. He's done virtually nothing since he got that hat trick at the beginning of the season. So if I'm going to go for like high ceiling talent that's not quite there yet, yeah, I'm probably going to go to Feyenoord and try to throw them 40 million for this guy instead of going after Evan Ferguson, who's done nothing since that hat trick. He's only scored one other goal since then. So if you want to go for high potential, like, somebody like that, maybe you go for the Santi Jimenez guy. Maybe you go for Benjamin Sesko, who's also doing similar things that you probably only have to pay like 40, 50 million for. But yeah, he might be all right. But, we're talking about bringing somebody in January as well, so adaptation. The January window is to bolster the team for now. So buying somebody that's going to need adaptation, when we've seen how our players have adapted in the past, Kivior and Fabio Vieira, I think, are very good examples of how long it takes for you to adapt to be in Arteta's system, get trust from Arteta. Kivior is not even playing still. Fabio just got a couple of starts at the beginning of this season. So to bring in somebody like that, I think would be a little bit of a risk if we need goals in January, which would be kind of like the only reason why we'd be, I think, doing it. Gabby says Jesus' all-around gameplay is good, but he does everything apart from put the ball in the back of the net. And Nketiah's all-around game isn't great, nor does he put the ball in the back of the net. Toney is a goal scorer. Nah, y'all, he's just Lacazette. We don't need that guy. He's a bum. Gabby says Eddie strolls around the pitch like he's earned the right to. I mean, he's a starter at Arsenal. So if I was Eddie and I had the number 14 on my back and I started 9 out of the 11 games that Arsenal played this season and I'm being rested for Manchester City, I'm walking around with my chest puffed out. You know? Jacob says, I think people are overrating Toney, in my opinion. I think he's being underrated quite a bit. Just because you're not Osimhen doesn't mean you're Eddie. And I feel like we're being a little arrogant here about what we should be willing to, bring in. There's not many strikers that are better than Toney at this stage. Like, you have Harry Kane, you have Osimhen. Who else? Who else? Um, who else does everybody else have? Holland. You have. I'm just thinking who else is out there. Who else plays in the Premier League? Maybe Isak, but Isak ain't scored no 15 goals in no Premier League season yet. So can you really say him? I'm really trying to think. And then if you go out into Europe, you have Kolo Muani, who doesn't look that great. You have Gonzalo, Ramos, that doesn't look that great. Nunez, for me, is a great talent, not really full potential yet realized. I'm just going through. Lewandowski is better than Toney, I think, still. So we're probably got a handful of strikers in world football that are like 100%, we know without a shadow of a doubt, are better than Ivan Toney. But he's Eddie, apparently. I think you can overrate a player. I don't think he's as good as Osimhen or Kane or anything like that. So that's not what I'm saying. But the idea that he's Lacazette for me is a little bit of like, come on, like, be serious. Legume says Ivan Toney just is so right. Gavi says Kubo, Nico Williams are strikers. They're wingers. Oh, like neither of them are. Yeah, they're like wingers. We don't need another versatile forward. We need somebody that is a number 9. No more versatile forwards. We have enough of those. Like, if we wanted to throw Saka in the middle, Martinelli in the middle, Trossard in the middle, Jesus in the middle, we could throw any of them central and we'd probably be okay. But we don't have a number 9. And that's what we need. No more versatile forwards, unless we're going for a winger, if that makes sense. Gavi says, footballing wise, Toney is great, but it's everything else that comes with him. What is everything else that comes with him? Like, again, if somebody can point me to an article or a video or something where it's obvious that he has a bad attitude, the the betting thing is one thing. So if that's what you're talking about in terms of what comes with him, I understand that, but I'm really trying, like, I need somebody to give me some concrete evidence of this bad attitude that Tony has, and it's going to carry, it's not going to follow him. Like, I think it's we're very much so overdoing the idea that he's some like bad locker room, person that's going to derail the vibes at Arsenal, and he's going to be like this bad character. Thomas Frank has literally said that he's like the ideal professional from like inside the dressing room. So what's gonna come with him? I don't really understand that. If he doesn't bet anymore, then what's coming with him? At this stage, he's not, I don't think he's gonna risk his career. So and nobody's gonna take a risk on him if he's not in like the right classes and things like that. So Ivan Toney gonna jeopardize the move that he's always wanted for his entire career? For betting? No. Or being a bad locker room presence? No. Like, what is he bringing with him? Please, somebody tell me. Yo-Yo says Osimhen screams Chelsea to me. I agree with you. I think, I think he ends up in London. Um, and the only London club I can really see him at is Chelsea because it's the vibe. I get what you're saying. Like, he's the kind that will go to a Chelsea. They're gonna spend the money, they're gonna make a big deal, and he completely turns them into, if Chelsea were to get Osimhen, they have a very, very scary team. So I could see them doing that, like skipping Tony and going for Osimhen. But I think Osimhen goes to Chelsea. Osimhen doesn't. I can't. I don't know why I can't see him in an Arsenal kit for some reason. But somebody tell me otherwise that he would come to Arsenal. I get what you're saying. Like, you can see certain players in certain kits, and I can see him at Chelsea. I see him in London. If he comes to England, he's coming to London. He's not going to Newcastle. He's not going to Manchester. He's going to be in London. Whether that's Arsenal or Chelsea, feels like a Chelsea signing. Like, very much so, spending 150 million, big deal. That's a very scary team. If Nkunku comes back in, the midfield options that they have, that's a very, very scary sign. So, you don't really want him going there, but can you really stop him? No. And Chelsea will have the money on hand because, again, Chelsea can sell their players. So they will be able to, you know, get rid of half of their team and have all this money to spend on Osimhen. So, yeah. David says, Tony, I'm not impressed by him. Momo says, we're in the Champions League. Yeah, I think so. Recklin Rice says, Jess, I will have to respectfully disagree with you on Tony. There are multiple footballistic and non-footballing reasons why I'm not in favor of Tony. I would love to know what those are. David says, nah, I want Osimhen over Tony. The thing is, we all want Osimhen over Tony, but that's not how the world works. Are you going to turn Tony down without actually knowing if we have the ability to even attract Osimhen or if that's who Arsenal want or not? People have this fantasy idea of Arsenal bringing in Osimhen that has not been backed up by anything. Like a couple of seasons ago, before we went for Jesus, there was a light rumor from Charles Watts that we had spoken to his agent, but I think you guys would be surprised at how many agents Arsenal have probably spoken to, and we didn't move on that at all. So I guess my thing is like, of course I want Mbappe. Of course I want Jude Bellingham. Of course I want, the best player in the world. But is it realistic for Arsenal to attract Osimhen, spend 100 and something million on this guy? And if we wait into the summer, are you 100% sure we're going to be in a position to attract him? Like, I don't know. Am I turning down Ivan Toney, who instantly makes us better, and by also moving Eddie out of the side for a pipe dream? I don't know. Not everybody's going to be Declan Rice. Like, Declan Rice wanted to come to Arsenal. He was 100% bought in. He's one of the first top quality players in a long time that I've seen be desperate to come to Arsenal. I don't think Osimhen will be the exact same. He's going to have so many different options. So, yeah, like, I want $1 million too, but am I going to turn down 5,000? Am I going to turn down, if I want, like, just because I may want 100 million pounds, but like, am I going to turn down £1 million because I can't get that? No, so I think it's just that simple. Everybody in the comments saying, but I want Osimhen. We haven't been linked to him at all since we bought Jesus. How do you know he'd even be interested in coming to us? Gunny says, we aren't spending 150 million on Osimhen. Move on. It ain't happening. Toney Vlahovic, more realistic price range. Rep says, by the way, Toney can pass. He's not a one-dimensional player. Boy says, don't want Mbappe either. What a disaster he would be. Alexander says, we might get better impact on Skamaka deal. Tawanda says, what happened with Jonathan David? He just was never that good, and people realized it and left him where he was at. Lionide says, there is no way Arsenal would pay that high fee for Osimhen. Just forget it. Tez Reddy says, something is wrong with these people. We need upgrades up front. I would gladly take Toney. I tell you who I don't want. I don't want Vlahovic. Toney will score goals, period. Yo-Yo says there's a clear profile of 9 that succeeded at Chelsea in the Prem era, and Osimhen fits that like a glove. C. Walder says, I'm not trolling when I compare Toney to Laka. Maybe I just haven't seen the right games. Fair enough. The thing is like, maybe I just can't see it, but as much as I would prefer to go for the top guy in that position that we could get, that, I can see the arguments against Toney. But again, just because I want 100 million doesn't mean I'm going to turn down $1 million. I'm not, because Arsenal are just not in the position, I think, where we just have the world at our feet and we're just going to can turn down Toney and Osimhen's just going to walk through the door. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so do I think Toney ticks enough boxes where he becomes not just somebody that we're like a stopgap, but somebody that instantly improves us, that, gets us into, like, we could win the league with Toney. I think that's what I'm like saying. Could we win major trophies with Ivan Toney at Arsenal? Yes. Are we Real Madrid going to win 3 in a row Champions Leagues? No. But if Toney is in the team, do I think that we have a much better chance of taking Manchester City all the way to the end? Yes, I do. Do I think that we could go far in the Champions League with Toney in our team? Yes, I do. So with that in mind, I'm not that willing to just turn him down because he's not Osimhen. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's balance there. But I also don't view him as low as other people do. As like, I saw people putting up that, like, it's so funny. I saw statistics that, showed that Eddie was like near Toney in some way. And I just laughed because I was just like, that's how you use stats. Like, sometimes, like, you have to use your eye test. If you think Eddie and Ivan Toney are on any, like, the same level in any way, shape, or form, you're smoking some high grade and you need to pass it to me, because I want to be as high as you. There's just no way. We know that what Ivan Toney is. He's not the top of the tree of an Osimhen, but there's probably only a handful of strikers that are legitimately better than him that we can get to. So that's where we are. Boy says, if Toney's goal dries up, what does he offer us? Hold up play, link up play, dead balls, penalties. Do I need to go further than that? Like, the idea that Toney is just a tap-in merchant is also a fallacy. Watch his compilations, or just watch him play. Like go watch a Brentford game, an old Brentford game. He does not just only tap the ball in. He has many facets to his game that could help Arsenal. Like, I don't know. Yo-Yo says Eddie can't talk to Toney. He can't. The idea that they're on the same, like, playing field, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing Eddie. I'm hearing Lacazette. I'm hearing all type of nonsense. He has the physicality. Like, basically, like, he could do what Kai did in the Community Shield without scoring a goal, and better. So let's not act like he just scores goals and that's it. David says, Jess, I do agree Toney can improve us in the goal scoring and final third entry, but I'm still worried that he will disrupt the overall system that has been cemented at Arsenal. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, David, though. Like, Arsenal need to evolve beyond having a number 9 that has to be a number 10 as well, as much as Jesus was last season. When we think about the way our midfield was constructed last season, you had Odegaard and you had Xhaka and you had Partey, which is a very good midfield, but they were heavily helped. Like, they were helped quite a bit by Zinchenko and Jesus. Zinchenko becoming a double pivot next to Partey, and Jesus coming back and playing sometimes like a number 8, sometimes like a number 10. For Arsenal to evolve, I do think we need to rely less so on inversion and our number 9 being so like heavily involved with our creativity. Now, having somebody like Toney is not going to completely eliminate it, and having somebody like Timber at left back instead of Zinchenko is not going to completely eliminate the inversion, but it's not as obvious. And I think we became extremely predictable because you knew there's not going to be anybody up front. Jesus was going to come central, so flood the middle, and it just eliminates the overloads that we have in midfield. And we don't have anybody up top to hold the ball up, to link play with up there, to just hit on crosses, nothing. And so I feel like we're very wedded to a system that is not going to suit us going forward. It's we could evolve that system. It could still be similar, but I think the addition of somebody like Timber was to mitigate having to be so inverted all the time, which is what we need. Zinchenko can be like he was okay against Manchester City, but Manchester City pretty much denied him the ability to just kind of like run around midfield. Like he definitely had to stay more in a left back spot, right? Jesus is not coming as deep either, because people had figured that out. So we need somebody up front. And I think it's okay for us to evolve beyond what we know, which is, our number 9 has to be somebody that's like always linking play, is back in the midfield and stuff like that. Our midfield at some point needs to be 3 guys that can dominate a midfield almost by themselves. And right now we don't have that, but we can get there, we can get there. But the striker needs to be able to kind of just be a target man at some point as well. We need that option. Frey says, but can we talk about Toney is reported to be 80 million? That's not far from Osimhen. It is very far from Osimhen. But yeah, they are saying that it's going to be 80 if like the price. So yeah, this is a good place to kind of like wrap up the conversation as well. If we have to spend 80 million on Toney and we can't throw Eddie the other way, then I kind of get what you guys are saying as well, as about like, okay, so isn't it worth spending 40 more? Osimhen is not going for 100 million. Only if he doesn't sign a new deal. But I could totally see him signing a new deal with Napoli so that they can get as much as possible. But they know that somebody in the Premier League will still purchase him. That's the truth. Napoli are not going to be afraid of getting Osimhen on a new deal and nobody coming for him with a high fee. They know it. They know it. And I feel like Osimhen, the way that he's dealt with the whole situation with them racially abusing him, it's still open that he could potentially do that. Now, if he doesn't, he'll probably go for the same as Harry Kane. Harry Kane still went for almost 100 million. So, you can use that as a comp. Let's say use that as a comp. Let's say he goes for 100 million. So yeah, if Toney is 80 million, then yeah, you want to spend you might want to just use that money to go for Osimhen instead. He makes less sense at 80 than he did at 50, 60. But I still don't think Osimhen will be that. I think Osimhen will go for more. I do think he's going to sign a small extension in good faith so that when Napoli end up selling him, they'll get a record fee. I don't think they'll allow, I do think that will happen. So yeah, 80 million for Toney, now you're getting a little crazy. 60 million or being able to make weight for Eddie makes more sense. So the fee also does come into play, I think, like you guys are saying. But we would also have the money right there if we didn't spend it on Kai Havertz, which is what's really just like rattling my brain right now. Richie Rabbit says Osimhen will go to CFC if they want him. Recklin Dice says if Jess said that, then she really disrespecting Jesus. I can't believe she said that. Jesus missed 4 months of football and only scored 3 less than Toney non-penalty goals. Yeah, but Toney was also at Brentford and not Arsenal. Like, you guys, like Jesus was on a nasty, he was on a nasty goal drought before he got injured for the World Cup. He did not score a goal from, I think, when we played against Spurs early on in the season last season. And it all the way to December, he did not score, or November, or whenever the World Cup started. So I'm hearing what you guys are saying. You guys are taking these 4 months into account, but Jesus basically did exactly what he does in every single other every other team he's ever been in, or at least Manchester City and Arsenal. He is not clinical. The stats back it up. It's not disrespectful to Jesus. I said he's a world-class player. So the thing is like nobody can tell me I'm disrespecting Jesus. One, because I wanted him at Arsenal. I wanted him at Arsenal before he even was linked to us. I was like, he would be perfect for us. He would be perfect. So, but I'm not going to lie about Jesus and say that he's this clinical guy and he would have scored 25 goals last season had he had not been injured for those four months, because before even the World Cup even started, he was on a nasty goal drought. We know that. He was suffering. We know that. And he went into the World Cup with that on his head anyway. So the idea that he would have magically scored these goals, does that even line up with this season? He's missing big chances now. Like, Jesus is what he is. He does not score enough goals. But the thing about Toney that's different than Jesus is Jesus has played in two teams that create more chances than anybody else. Manchester City and Arsenal. So if you can't score more than 15 goals with Arsenal and Manchester City, then what are we talking about? Toney hasn't even played in an elite setup yet. So if he's already scoring just as much, but more than Jesus in a team that doesn't create anywhere near as many chances, am I really that is it that big of a hot take to say that Toney is a better center forward than Jesus, despite Jesus being a better overall footballer? Am I speaking a different language? I'm not disrespecting Jesus by saying he's not clinical. I'm not disrespecting Jesus by saying that no matter what would have happened last season, he probably would have ended up with the same amount of goals. I'm not disrespecting him because the numbers back it up. We've been watching him for years. He's been in England for a long time. We know what Jesus is about. So it's not disrespectful to him. But Toney is a better center forward than Jesus. I stand on it. I stand on it. Like, I will stand on that. I think if you put Toney in Arsenal's system that creates more system than Brentford's, that creates more chances than Brentford's, he will score more goals than Jesus has ever scored in a single season. You know why? Because Toney scores the easy goals. Now, he's on penalties, he scores on dead balls, and he also scores the easy goals. The ones that Jesus tries to beat 3 or 4 men, Toney just kicks it in the back of the net. So the chance that Jesus got yesterday where he tried to juke like 4 or 5 guys when he could have tried to take a shot or just gave it to Declan Rice, Toney puts that in the back of the net. The chance where Eddie is in on goal, like Odegaard hits it over to him, like over like a little chip ball, and Eddie turns backwards, Toney smacks that in the back of the net. We're not scoring the easy goals, and we're just making up stuff because we don't want Toney, because Toney's not Osimhen. Y'all, Toney is a better center forward than Jesus. I love Jesus. I love him. I love him. But he's not clinical. He's not clinical. Like he knows it. He knows he's not clinical. Gunny says, I definitely take Toney over Nketiah, but ultimately he is an upgrade on Jesus, in my opinion. I'd rather we get Vlahovic, who at least has enough youth to grow beyond Jesus, whereas Toney is a question mark. Fair enough. If you guys think Jesus is a better center forward than Toney, then we are living on 2 completely different planets. Jesus is a better footballer, but it's like we haven't been watching him for the last 2 seasons. We're ignoring clear things of when he gets in the box, he does not score the easy goals. He tries to juke many people and then gets the ball taken away or tries to get a penalty instead of just putting it in the back of the net. Come on now. Jesper says, Ivan Toney will not be a lot better than Jesus. I disagree. I think he can score 20 goals in 1 season. I think he'll do that for us. Nuances says, I don't see what you see in Toney. If we signed him, you'd see him for what he is, slightly above average. Okay, you guys think he's slightly above average? I think these are some very big takes here that Toney is basically the same as Nketiah, Lacazette. He wouldn't be that much better of a striker than Jesus, which the goal of a striker is to score goals, right? So we're not talking about, is he going to be able to dribble better than Jesus? Is he going to be able to, press as good as Jesus? We're talking about, is he going to score more goals, put more goals in the back of the net? Just by the fact that we could actually just cross it into Toney and he could head it in the back of the net, the idea that he's not going to be able to score at least 20 goals with Arsenal, with Saka and Martinelli on either side of him, y'all are reaching. You guys are reaching. I'm sorry. Just because you want Osimhen or somebody like that doesn't mean that Toney is the same as Nketiah or Jesus or Lacazette as a striker. Like, you're reaching. So yeah. Ultimate says, no disrespect to Brentford. Toney single-handedly beat Toney at home and away last season. He's a big game player. We struggle against big games, especially away from home. We need Toney, and Nketiah is not it. I hope we do buy him. And like, I want us to buy him just for the simple fact that like he will get whatever Jesus got at the beginning of last season, and at the very end, he'll get that and he'll get it easy. Because the easy ones that just drop into the box, he's just going to kick it in the back of the net. I don't like, how many times have we scored easy goals? Every single goal that we score is so hard to get because we have to take a bunch of touches. But I hope we get him now. I hope we get him now. I hope we get him now. Like, it's wild to me, what people are saying. Yo-Yo says we've already changed the way that we play from last season, so a new type of number 9 would help. So yeah, um, I don't think it would be that big of a deal for us to put Toney in there and him not come as deep as Jesus was last season. I think that worked for a significant amount of time, but also as teams decided like, okay, yeah, we're gonna sit in a deep block, it became less effective. I thought towards the end of the season. Jesper says, I'd rather sign Osimhen. He'll score 25, 30 goals than Ivan Toney, who would score 15 to 20 goals. Yeah, exactly. You'd rather have 100 million, but you're still not going to turn down a million if you can't get 100 million. So I hear that. Like saying I'd rather have Osimhen, who we're not linked with and we're probably not going to get. We're talking about, would Toney be a good fit for Arsenal? Not whether I'd want Osimhen over Toney, because we're not even linked with Osimhen. He's not even an option. Lionite says, Arsenal do cutbacks, Brentford do crosses. Are you sure about Toney? Yeah, because when Toney gets there, when he gets the cutback, he's not going to take a million touches or blast it over the net. He's just going to put it in the back of the net. Yes, I am sure that he will score goals. Yes. Ian says Jesus is better in build up, better off the ball, better work rate, and contributes more. Is that what we need from our striker now, though? Like, who's saying that Toney will not do any of the hard work? What do we need from our number 9 right now that we're not getting now? Is it pressing? Is it what? Like, it's not, y'all. We need somebody that can hold the ball up, that can add a physical presence, that could give us a plan B, and is going to put the ball in the back of the net. Like, if you guys want pressing and hard work, stick with Eddie. Stick with Eddie. That's what he was doing against City yesterday, was just running around. So keep Eddie. That's what you want. Gunny says, Jess, I think you're ignoring the fact that people aren't really keen on Toney because of the price. We can go for somebody who's better and younger. 80 million for a 27, 28-year-old who only has 2 seasons in the Premier League. First of all, Arsenal fans need to get real about age and the fact that like players are playing until they're like 35 now and they're fine. So the idea that Toney only has 2 more years before he hits this slope is just something out of like some statistician or some guy that's worrying all the time. Like it's it who cares? Like every single player that we buy does not have to be a child, right? Now, we already discussed that if the price is 80 and the price for somebody else could be 100, then yeah, maybe Toney doesn't make as much sense. But you guys are also assuming that the price of Osimhen is 100, and I don't think that it is. I don't think that it is. He's much younger than Harry Kane, and Napoli are no mugs. They're not going to just sell him for nothing because we want him. And again, we haven't been linked to him or anything. So take Osimhen off the table, because let's just say that he doesn't want to come to Arsenal, because that could be a case. He could say, you know what, if I come to the Premier League, I only want to go to Chelsea. So let's take him off the table. Who else is there? Who else is there that you guys can say confidently makes us better? Like, come on. This, I think we're really like thinking about Osimhen in a way that like doesn't make sense to me, because it's almost like saying, you know what, I don't want Toney because, or I don't know. It's like saying that you don't want somebody that instantly improves you and ticks a lot of boxes because you have this pie in the sky. Like, I don't want this good woman in my life that's going to cook, for me and clean the house, because I want Angelina Jolie. You ain't getting Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie's not even looking your way. Angelina Jolie doesn't know you exist. She doesn't even know you exist. So take the good woman. Take the good woman that's going to cook and clean and keep you safe. Keep her. That's all I'm saying, y'all. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, I think Toney does tick a lot of boxes. I think people are being not only disingenuous about him, but also we're very arrogant as a fan base, and we want, the extravagant, exotic person that's not in the league, or the young kid that's the future that hasn't scored since his last hat trick, whatever, instead of somebody in the league that we kind of know is a known quantity that we know is better than what we have. Um, and we only want young players in the team. We don't want anybody that's 27, 28 yet. Ian Wright is one of our legends, and when he came to us, he was old as fuck. So yeah, but but I respect everybody's opinion. You want Angelina Jolie, but personally, I'm okay with a good woman that's gonna cook and clean and keep me safe. So there you go. You guys, let's get out of here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, look at the bottom for upcoming content. We have post matches available. You guys can watch that. Rewatch is going to be available for patrons in like an hour or so. Colleen tomorrow, Lee Judges on Thursday, Dan Potts on Monday. So that is, the content schedule. I'll see what we're going to do on Friday, if we're going to do anything or not. But content is coming to you. This is so fun. I actually had fun arguing with you guys because what else will we be doing after a big win? What else will we be doing about besides arguing about an imaginary scenario that may or may not even happen? So there you go. But if you just are joining, please watch the whole thing. It was a good show, and you guys definitely gave it back and gave some takes, and you said with conviction, which I love. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and get into the vibes, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. I may do 2 shows tomorrow, by the way, so stay tuned for that. And there's a community poll. I need to know when you guys are most likely available for live shows. So go to the community poll and make sure you guys vote on that, because I need to know when you guys watch live shows, so I know whether or not it's worth doing this show a little bit earlier and doing another show a little bit later, so we can do 2 live shows a day. So I need you guys to vote on that on the community page. But I love y'all. I love y'all. Talk to you guys soon. Bye. You guys are the